Hi, it's Mark from Top Local Lead Generation. We're here with Bernie Pawlik of Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver. They're Vancouver's best auto service experience, 16-time winners of Best Auto Repair in Vancouver. How are you doing today, Bernie?
Really well, Mark.
So, BMW 325i 2005 with a positive crankcase ventilation problem. What was going on with this vehicle?
Well, this vehicle came to us. Our customer's concern was that every time he'd start it up when it was cold, it would blow out a big cloud of smoke. And also the engine was running rough at idle and the check engine light was on. These are kind of classic symptoms of a crankcase vent valve problem on a BMW.
So a classic problem. So I guess you see these quite often?
I would say that that every one of these BMW six-cylinder engines will experience this problem at some point in its life, whether it's at 100,000 or 200,000 kilometers, somewhere in that range. This will happen. The crankcase vent valves blow open, and they cause. I mean, it's not a guarantee. We do a diagnosis to make sure that's what it is, but these symptoms usually indicate a crankcase vent valve: burning blue smoke, rough idle, and excess pressure or excess vacuum in the crankcase is usually classic symptoms.
So what is a crankcase positive ventilation valve, and what does it do?
Crankcase vent valve, basically, it's one of the earliest emission control devices that were put on vehicles back in the olden days, and I'm talking back in like the 1950s and 60s, but to some extent even diesels up into the 70s and 80s. Had an open crankcase vent. Crankcase is basically the sort of space in the engine where the crankshaft rotates and the piston, the connecting rods move up and down. It also encompasses the valve cover area. So it's kind of the open spaces that are sealed inside the engine, and pressure builds up inside there because as the combustion process takes place, it's not 100% sealed. Some gases escape. There's also moving air from the moving part. So the gases that escape, they're called blow-by gases, are extremely noxious. These are like 100 times more toxic than what comes out of the tailpipe. And so what they did initially is developed a positive crankcase ventilation valve. This is the simplest type of thing, and it basically sucks the fumes from the crankcase back into the engine and reburns them. So it probably lowers your engine efficiency very slightly, but what BMW has done, a lot of European cars, they've got a more sophisticated ventilation system, and I can't really speak to what is more sophisticated about it. But what does happen is basically the little PCV valve that you used to find on most American and Japanese cars is now involved into this big round piece. I'm going to share some photos here, and just give a minute for the technology to catch up with us. But basically, it's evolved into this.
Didn't show up yet.
Okay, here we go, Mark. Okay, you got it?
Yep.
This is the crankcase vent valve, and this piece is actually broken in half. If you look at the sort of round piece on the bottom, you can see a hole, and there's a broken piece, and that attaches to the round piece on the right-hand side. But inside, there's a couple of different rubber diaphragms, and this attaches to the intake vacuum system, and these diaphragms control the amount of vacuum being sucked through the and blow-by gases being sucked back into the engine. Now, what happens to these valves is that this rubber diaphragm over time will rip and tear, and so you're getting full engine vacuum sucking on the engine, and that ends up sucking oil through the engine. So that's basically what happens. That's how it works.
So it's that diaphragm is what fails?
The diaphragm is what fails, yeah. There are also another number of other pieces to this system, and I'll just go look at our next picture. You can see the vent valve on the right-hand side and a bunch of hoses and pipes. And these are all the crankcase vent pipes. They're pretty complicated on BMWs. There's a lot of European cars use this system. Porsches have the same problem. They'll start blowing blue smoke and the vent valve blows. But anyways, on BMW they use a lot of plastic breather pipes, Volkswagen and Audi as well. And these pipes deteriorate after a while. The crankcase gases and oils are pretty noxious and toxic, and they'll eventually eat through these pipes and pieces. So getting back to me here, I think. There we go. Yeah, so those are the pieces.
And so do all of
those
those
are the other
parts need
parts.
to be replaced?
Yes, they do. Because basically what happens is they get hard and brittle over time, like, you know, a lot of plastic pieces. As soon as you go to remove one, and they just snap and break. So it's a kind of complete job. You do the vent valve, do all the breather pipes, and it's done and forgotten about. And this engine was great. I mean, it afterwards we started it up. There's no more smoke. But one other interesting thing did happen with this vehicle. It ran great for about 10 minutes, and then we shut it off and started it, and then it started running rough. And turned out one of the cylinders was misfiring. We examined the spark plugs, and one of them had fouled up. And so I think this thing had been sucking so much oil it fouled the spark plugs, and we replaced those two. They looked kind of old anyhow, so they were probably due to be replaced. But we do these vent valves all the time. It's the first time we've had spark plugs fail, but it will happen if you suck enough oil in there and it fouls the plugs.
So is that just a function of the owner ignoring it for long enough that it started to pull oil?
That's a great question. No, it's just something that's going to happen. It's just part of the design of the engine. It's just a part that's going to wear out. So there's nothing you can do to make it last any longer. At some point, it will just fail. And the good news is, you know, when you see that kind of blue smoke coming in the engine, you think, wow, I mean, my engine's gone. But it's not. Fortunately, it's not a cheap fix, but it's not like a ring and valve job like you would typically expect for something like that kind of smoking.
Sure. So this was a 2005 BMW 325. So they've been around for a long time, many years actually. How are they for reliability?
There's a really reliable cars. I mean, the BMW 6-cylinder is an excellent engine. Not flawless, but this is probably the one major consistent problem you can count on for these. They do have a few cooling system problems like water pumps and thermostats, and there's a lot of plastic parts that break, in the engine area and cooling system. But other than that, very reliable car. I mean, really rock solid, well built. It's a great car. I highly recommend them.
So if you're looking for some service on your BMW 325i, or if you're blowing smoke out of any BMW or Audi or Volkswagen, Porsche, the guys to call are Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver, 604-327-7112 to book your appointment. They're busy, you got to book ahead, or check out their website, pawlikautomotive.com. Thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, Mark.